relations from the political side. I was also associated with the trade relations as Joint Secretary Exports in the Ministry of Textiles, handling cotton exports. And then on the cultural relations side as Joint Secretary handling international cultural relations when we did the Festival of India in China. Ambassador Suri had encouraged me to study China and document and write about it in my first book, India's Relations with the International Monetary Fund. And we did document the rise of China in the international monetary system and so how this huge transformation that Shastri ji had mentioned occurred. And thereafter, my interest in studying Chinese economy had enhanced. And when I discussed with Shastri ji what he wants me to speak on, and we zeroed in on the economic growth in China and the current relationship as also the trade relations that we are witnessing, about which there are a number of references in his book. So at the outset, let me congratulate him for this publication. It's been endorsed by so many foreign policy thinkers, ambassadors, Ranjan Mathai, Nirupama Rao, Ashok Kanta, Vijay Nambiar, Lalit Mansingh, so many foreign policy experts. And Ambassador Shyam Saran has said that he found the reading of the first phase of the book where the author mentions about the workings in the Chinese media is most interesting. In fact, I took with great interest that the book begins with this proverb, men trip not on mountains, but they trip over molehills. And I was wondering why he put that proverb there. And then I realized there he starts with his years with the China's Daily, where he is working with the assistants in the Chinese Daily, who seem very preoccupied with working with levels at lower down. And as you work your way up, then the experience with Xinhua, and many of you who would be seeing Xinhua's website would notice that it's one of the good websites, very informative kind of websites. And then they run with Global Times, which is a Chinese language newspaper. I thought Global Times also had an English version currently.
No, currently
it has an English version too. So let me focus on the first 4 chapters of the book, Behind the Great Wall, where he deals with society, politics, economics, media and cyber security. So I was quite fascinated. In my years in Washington DC, the Chinese office, the ED's office was just next to the Indian ED's office, and we had common interactions and a lot of discussion on how emerging market economies would rise. So one of the big stories was that how did China's growth story happen? And as Shastri ji writes, people worked hard, got rich and bought cars. Don't be left behind was the message. And I would often see this huge discussion between the Federal Reserve Chairman of the United States and the Chairman of the People's Bank of China, Zhao Ziaochuan, and this great man who served for 17 years as the Federal Reserve Chairman. And often global imbalances was the big issue. And then what happened was 2008, the global financial crisis showed that China had emerged on the global scene. They could beat the global crisis with a major fiscal stimulus, extraordinary credit expansion, and pegging the renminbi to a fixed currency. And what it also showed was that it could have major spillovers. Suddenly, here was an $18 trillion economy, $13,000 per capita, and it had to have a currency which was more in tune with global currency values and practices. And that was what the Americans started making a lot of noise about, that currency manipulation, that the renminbi was not adequately a managed float, or if not a free float. The second was, how does China get its economy balanced? It was running huge current account surpluses. And they started with these 4 big policies, going global, one belt, one road, renminbi internationalization, and Made in China 2025. And the big initiative was the Belt and Road Initiative, wherein which they wanted to collapse bilateral FTAs into multilateral FTAs. There are also a lot of writing on this trade war with United States, And as you would recall, that the United States had imposed more than $250 billion of sanctions on China. And China retaliated with $110 billion of tariffs on the United States. The IMF was asked to mediate if Chinese currency was broadly appropriate, and the IMF said that it's broadly in line with fundamentals. But what we do notice is, as the IMF reforms of 2015 happened, and we found that China's clout on global financial institutions suddenly grew. It became the third largest economy in the world, the third largest quota holder in the world, and still it had a managed float. It had contradictory impulses, more freedom for markets with a heavy hand of government intervention. So stability of financial markets represented a big challenge. And as we look forward in 2024, what we see is an economic growth slowdown to 4.6%, further slowing down to 3.5% in the coming years, and so many interlinkages that a 1 percentage point decline in China's growth rate can actually cause a 0.25% decline in the sub-Saharan African growth rates, and even a 0.5% decline in the oil exporting countries like Angola and Nigerian growth rates. So we wait to see how the post-pandemic, post-war economy shapes up. There were 2 points of Shastriji's book that I found particularly interesting. One was the rollback of the one-child policy to the current norm of having 3 children. And a lot of people said that it's very important to have more children, and that the decreasing population, the working age population, had come down a great deal. So we wait to see the impact of this massive changeover. I'm told my time is up, so I'll stop here. So the big issue is this massive trade surplus that China is running, how it would be playing out. What happens if the spillover effects of a Chinese slowdown and the impact that is particularly seen on many of their FTAs and multilateral projects, investment projects that they have currently invested. That is something that we wait to see. Thank you very much.